Hello, welcome to Green Transportation panel. This panel we held in English. And my name is Ragnar Saksing. I'm from Tallinn Science Park Technopol, leading Green Tech Cluster in Technopol. My background is I was studying in university biology, but I have been working in technology field more than 20 years. So recently, 4 years ago, I combined these two subjects and got the answer green technology. Also, I'm the author of IDEA Greenest Summit, which is the largest green tech conference in region. Greenest Summit happens this year in October, and for you, I have also discount code 20% here. Okay, why we're talking about green transportation? Some hard facts from Estonia. Estonia has high growth of car use. 600 cars per 1,000 people. And this is first in Europe, by the way, in statistics. The Estonian car fleet is also the oldest in Europe. Average is 16.7 years. European average is 11.6. And as we know, probably, that person uses his personal car only 5% per day. So this is important in regard of environment. And also Estonian transportation's emissions have increased nearly 30% since 2014. So this is very important subject. And we are on Earth stage, so we are talking about how we can impact Earth better. We have 5 panelists, and I will introduce them, and they also around 15 minutes. Then we talk about 40 minutes prepared questions, and then we can take questions from you, listeners. First panelist I would like to introduce is Kai Realo, one of the most recognized top leader in Estonia. Today she is General Director and Board Member of CycleK. And from August 23rd, her new position is Chairman of the Board, Ragn-Sells. As we know, Ragn-Sells Group is privately held corporation group involved in waste management and recycling. And the Ragn-Sells job offer came to her life at the very right moment, she said, to manage important topics for her, which is environmental sustainability and circular economy. She has degree from Tallinn Technical University and MBA from Tartu University. And we also asked fun facts about every panelist. And Kai's fun fact is about her graduation from Tallinn Technical University. She actually gained a degree about how to compile and process databases. She is programmer. However, she never done such work directly because marketing attracted her more. Please, Kai, please give you a few highlights about and main points about your connections with green transportation.
Yeah, I think it's obvious that current job in Circle K has some touch points with new green energy. First, we have this biofuel legislation which we have to meet, but more or less we are also setting up the strategies how to kind of convert our fuel stations towards to be charging points for electrical cars. so I can give some input or my view on what is needed from infrastructure point of view, and deep knowledge about consumers, what they prefer, how to kind of change their minds one step in a time. So I think this is something I can give and be a part of these discussions.
Thank you, Kai. Our next panelist would like to introduce is Fraser Creighton. Fraser is Corporate Fleet Manager, Dundee City Council, Scotland. Fraser has worked for Dundee City since 2001. In 2011, he was appointed as Transport Manager for the newly formed Corporate Fleet Department. Proactive in council drive towards the electric vehicle, the city taxi industry, he has presented at many UK European conferences where he has articulated his knowledge and expertise in electric vehicles and infrastructures. Those who don't know Dundee, Dundee city population is about 150,000. And Dundee City accounts for 10% of UK digital entertainment industry, including mobile app development and gaming. In 2014, Dundee was recognized by the United Nations as the UK's first UNESCO City of Design of its diverse contributions to health, including medical research, comic and video gaming. And fun fact about Fraser, once he spent 30 minutes with Kylie Minogue in a deep freeze unit, Sydney, looking at ice sculptures.
This is true.
How it is related to green transportation, somehow.
It's just a fun fact.
Please, Fraser, what are your extra highlights about green transportation?
Yeah, I think that when I'm talking about what we've done in the UK, I always start by saying that I started this journey over 11 years ago. So we started looking at e-mobility, looking at moving the transportation away to combustible engine a long time ago. So what I would say is that when I'm speaking here, and I've been here for a day and a half, it feels like Estonia is on the cusp of really moving away from the combustible engine, and they're really interested in trying to find out how that's going to work. And the amount of questions that I've been asked about what was the big change that you need to make, and I think this is the classic example of what you do need to make. You need to have these engagements, communication, understanding of how we're going to go and do this, and that's what the people of Estonia have been asking me all day. How do we transition over, and all the difficulties of I've got transportation, I live in the country, what sort of vehicle are you talking about, because I need to go 300 miles, etc. All those questions. Is electric vehicles, what's the situation with hydrogen? All these questions are being asked, and I think that I'm really quite excited, all the conversations I had of the journey that Estonia looks like it's just about to begin. Yeah,
thank you. Yeah, we had a nice meeting before in a city hall. Yeah, our scientist in panel is Tauri Tuvikene. He has PhD. He's an urban geographer, a new professor in urban studies in the School of Humanities, Tallinn University. His research and teaching deals with urban cultures, transport, and policies. He has studied the experience and regulation in urban mobility and automobility from urban mobility to automobility to walking and public transport. From 2019, he is project leader of European Commission supported international project of public transportation and public space. And fun fact, about Tauri. He's keen walker and co-founder of Estonian Pedestrian Association. So, and he favors urban planning for pedestrians. No new development or technology should restrict the humble walker. Please, your highlights about green transportation.
Thank you very much. I think you introduced the best perspective of mine to this topic. So basically, yeah, we are in a panel which is mostly focusing on electric mobility, electric transport. But I guess the point I want to make is that, yes, all cars should be electric, yeah, but we should have fewer cars and we should have actually less driving around. So these are basically the 3 points I would like here to be maintained. So yeah, first of all, of course, electric cars are more environmentally friendly. I mean, the different statistics have shown about 1/3 or half better in terms of emissions through the whole life cycle, right? We talk about production as well. We don't talk just about the use, but we also talk about the production and later on disposal of the vehicles. And but the other aspect is, yes, that because they are not zero emission, right? So they are actually because the emissions are made in the time when the cars are produced and the batteries are produced. So we actually need to take this into account as well. So we actually want to produce, less cars as possible. So I think, and to get to this point about pedestrians and walking, I would say that walking is let's say the most environmentally friendly way to move around in the cities, and it's health benefits. It's about it gives you strength. It develops your lungs, your blood system. It is social, right? We are together in a public space with other people. All things which are not there for cars, actually. So in a way, I would steer this debate a little bit at some moments, maybe to pay attention to not just cars but also other road users.
Thank you. Our next panelist is Councillor Peter Marland. Welcome. Peter has been leader of Milton Keynes Council since 2014. And under his leadership, Milton Keynes has positioned itself as British pioneer in sustainable growth. And those who don't know Milton Keynes, population of Milton Keynes is 230,000. And the Milton Keynes has one of the most successful economies in UK. Ranked highly against several criteria, it is UK 5th highest number of business startups per capita. It is home for several major national and international companies. Peter is current board member of Local Partnership, an infrastructure and delivery agency jointly owned by local government, HM Treasury and the Welsh government. Between 2016 and 20, he was vice president of Energy Cities, representing the interest of energy and climate change transition within EU institutions. And of course, he have been spoken all around the world, in China, in Europe, and also about Milton Keynes. Milton Keynes aims for 23% of all new vehicles sold to be electric by 2022. 23%, UK average is 8 to 9%. So they have made something special in Milton Keynes, and also they are increasing charge points fast and good charging. And then Pete's fun fact is, he's running a half marathon in October. He's preparing, but he has never run more than 3 miles before in his life. So, very good. Milton, what are your green transportation points you want to point out?
Yeah, so I think you mentioned there, as I'm very proud to be the leader of a city where we've got more electric vehicle charging points than per head of population than anywhere else in the world. We've got an electric bus service. We have an Estonian company that pioneered autonomous delivery called Starships. You may know them. Sort of its first delivery was in Milton Keynes. So we've got great links to your economy. But the point I would make, and I think it's similar to your point, is transport is a means to an end. It's not a thing in itself. Transport is where you go from somewhere to somewhere, or you take something from somewhere to somewhere, and it has to link into the more general point around sustainability, that if we're going to tackle climate change, it can't just be about making cars electric, because that electricity has to come from somewhere. But if you're a young person, like there are many young people in the audience, if you can't get a job locally and you have to live, say, here and commute into Tallinn, that's possibly why you've got to own a car. And I think it's really easy, where I sort of perhaps defer slightly, is the thing about the car is it's really, really good. It's efficient. It's generally cheap. It's warm, so you don't get rained on. It's nice because you can get in it when you want to get in it, and it takes you where you want to go when you want to go, not when somebody else says you should go. And it's also a matter of freedom. I remember when I got my driving license, it was that point in my life where I can go anywhere. It's
like freedom.
It's free. It literally, and when the car became very popular in the 1970s, it coincided with a big change in personal freedoms as well. It's a style of life. And I think unless we plan communities to move away from being car-based to being more cycle-based or foot-based or public transport-based, then we're onto a loser. But that's more than just the built environment. It's about making sure that there are local jobs for local people, that making sure that those jobs are sustainable, making sure that the jobs create wealth that isn't just for a very small minority of people. It's actually filtered down to a much more majority of people. So if we're going to tackle climate change, it can't just be about rich Western people in rich cities. It has to be about thinking about the broader sense of what is development, what is sustainable development, and transport has its place in that. And we all have a role to play in making sure that some of the choices that we make are sustainable ones.
True. By the way, I felt this freedom recently again. Not recently, but 3 to 5 years ago, when I started biking in Tallinn. And freedom is that you can park anywhere. You can go old town, downtown, and you can park anywhere. And this feeling, I remember when you probably got your driving license. I remember also this freedom from my childhood. And now I felt it again with bike. And our last but not least panelist is also electric car owner. Kaia is partnership relation coordinator at state-owned foundation EIC. In Estonia, it's KIK. It's Environmental Investment Center. And during 20 years, the EIC has more than 20,000 projects supported with funding more than 2 billion euros in Estonia, including energy sector, water management, as well biodiversity, nature prevention, and raising awareness. And today's context, EIC has central role supporting the number of projects related to environmental and climate change. Also, they are issuing grants for electrical vehicles. And I don't know Kaia's personal fact because we have 13th of Friday today, and we had late change, and Andrus Trail. He had to leave personal reasons, and we needed to change only first name because they have same last names, but they are not related. Please, Kaia. You see, that's true.
Yes, thank you. You have crossed fun facts of Andrus. So
Yeah.
I have to make up quickly a fun fact. But while I'm making or thinking of the fun fact of myself, a little bit of my background. My scientific background is agrobiodiversity, so a bit similar to Ragnar. That to understand how the things work and also to understand the meaning of innovation and technology, what we will be talking about today, it's good to understand the basic stuff, which University of Life Sciences have helped me to understand. But yes, today I'm working as a partnership coordinator at the Environmental Investment Center. We think and we believe that green transformation in all sectors, it's not up to one organization. Green coalitions and networks are needed. It's a big challenge. So I'm the one helping to build these relations and networks and coalitions. Also at the Greenest Summit, we will be covering topics what you mentioned, urban planning and green mobility. Yes, why topics that I'm working daily, and today I happened to be in this panel. I know some facts about our grants, but please forgive me if I have to come back to some facts, because I just found out 10 minutes ago before I sat here that I will be sitting here.
We can manage it. Applause.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
But the fun fact, I think fun fact maybe is that my younger kids, they don't. One day I noticed that they don't use a word, let's tank a car. They know only let's load a car. And it was really great to notice that, because the older ones, they still use the word tank in Estonian, autot siis tankima, but the younger ones only say autot laadima. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, now we go to the questions we prepared and discussed before, and the main aim is the collaboration between two countries also, and then give maybe new facts and bust some myths about around EVs. And first question I want to first to give to Kai. That we think that we can decide whether we go electric or not. But what is really going on in car industry? What is really going on in industry? It's known fact that Estonians don't, in Estonia we don't produce cars. And Kai, what do you think? Do we have to adopt, or do we have any alternatives?
It's a good question. I think my personal opinion is that the decision is already made for us, because as you mentioned, there is no car manufacturer in Estonia, so we have to live with a car which are imported. And if we look what the current kind of small vehicles market is, all for is more or less they are going towards the electrical vehicles, and basically many of researches and estimations show that there is an estimation that 40 to 50% of new cars sold in 2030 will be already in Europe electrical vehicles. So what we can do is basically understand how to adapt them to our current very old car park, and how to transit from the fossil fuel engines to kind of new EV. So yes, I think what private consumers will sooner or later have to adopt this EV and find a way how to charge them and etc. What happens to B2B? I think it's a bit more complicated question, because current electrical batteries maybe are not very good for extreme long distances like our B2B customers use, but there are also other options.
Yeah, it's there are a lot of challenges, and challenges are also in urban environment, and I know the fact that in Dundee, you, Fraser, conducted the city government vehicles so that all city government are on electric. What were the obstacles and what were the surprises from that?
Yeah, the first thing I'll do is I'm going to be controversial as ever. I'm going to say I don't call a electric vehicle electric car. I call it it's an energy source on four wheels. I think we need to get away from the fact that we think we're just going from one mode of car to another. What we're going to a vehicle that has energy that can be put back into a building. So what you can do is you can move that energy about, and you just happen to be getting from A to B. So there's much more to this than just saying, I've now got a different mode of transport. If you start understanding that, and this is the controversial bit, mostly people a lot younger than me get it very quickly. A lot of people like my dad and my generation take a lot more time to understand the way we're going forward. So there you go, half the audience hate me. But going back to your question, what we decided to do was we have a serious problem in our city of pollution. The topography of the city means that the pollution from our vehicles goes nowhere except in our streets. If we could put a dye in the diesel and petrol vehicles that come out of our exhaust, this includes Estonia, if we could put a dye in the back of it, tomorrow we would change to EVs, if you understood what was coming out of your cars and killing our population. So we went to our NHS and we got some facts of what was actually happening coming out of these cars and what it was doing to our population. We then took the bold decision to then look at, for argument's sake, the taxi sector and said from the 2017, all new taxis will have to be 100% electric. And we proved that those electric vehicles could work in the city, and we made that decision. Now, I tend not to be able to get a taxi in the city now, personally, but that are the sort of bold decisions that have to be made to really drive this forward. We also looked at other sectors, and my own council, I'm sitting now in my vehicles at 37% are all electric. I'm committed, and that's including bin lorries, refuge vehicles, that includes big industrial. You need to start looking at all transportation and changing now. And that's not getting away from the fact that I believe exactly what was just said there. This new electric vehicles is not, or shall we say, energy source on four wheels, is not the answer for everything. There is walking and electric bikes, etc., etc. But we have to understand this is a technology that's going to change the way that not only we get from A to B, but where we're moving all the energy, which will be, we need to make sure that we are utilizing all the energy, renewable energy, as much as possible in all our buildings and all our vehicles, etc.
Mm-hmm. And that leads to Milton Keynes' case. What you have done? Did you also change taxis and?
No, so we've just introduced a transport on demand service, because again you come back to how technology is advancing transport. I don't own a car. I lease a car, and the world will move from just leasing a car to I will have a transport sort of account just as much as I might have a car. So one day I might want a car, tomorrow I might want to get on the train, the next day I might want to get on the bus.
Sure. And
so we've introduced a transport on demand service, which is effectively you can go on an app, you book it. It's a company called Viavan. They aggregate out all the journeys, and then we'll come and pick you up from your door with 7 other people and take you to sort of a joint location. So it's a middle way between
successful mobility as service.
It is a mobility as a service, and that's where I pay €320 currently for my car a month. That's a ridiculous amount of money for something that is sitting on another bit of land that isn't being used 95% of the time. If we can get the economics of this right, actually there's a whole host of benefits that we can get that aren't just environmental, but there'll be extra land. That land can be used for cheaper housing, for more jobs and things like that. So I personally see transport as a service, and moving forward sort of I will have a transport account rather than a single mode of transport is probably the way that we need to be pushing the agenda.
Yeah, and then we talk about 15-minute cities when we don't need our own car, and maybe as scientist you can elaborate that what that means, that 15-minute city for urban planning. And
I guess I mean it relates to the connection between transport mobility and land use and urban planning. That's one of the topics whenever I teach about mobilities, cities and mobilities for students. I emphasize the interlinkage of urban planning and mobility, and precisely, I mean, it's important that you live as close as possible to your work, and the other things you would use are also close by. I mean, so if there can be 15 minutes, perfect. 15 minutes walking, 15 minutes cycling, 15 minutes public transport. Of course, the challenge has been currently that if you talk about Estonian cities, that we talk about a lot of urban sprawl outside of the cities. We talk about quite a lot of living in remote areas, where in practical terms, of course, car is often actually the only means you can actually survive there. So of course, you know, I'm not going there. You should walk, because, you know, no, it's not possible in the way it's planned, both in land use terms, but also in terms of transport systems. So we don't have, I mean, public transport system is not there, or there's no on-demand transport, which could be another alternative. So, and if we come back to the electric mobility here, so I would actually also emphasize that the sort of geographical argument here, that of course in the cities they are often in use, and there is a lot of value because of the local emissions, right? But if you want to find a way to make electric mobility and cars in a way more, how to say, beneficial for society at large, then we should actually increase electric mobility also in rural areas, and to have, you know, really not just focus on the cities where you can cycle, where you can walk, where the public transport usually is good. I mean, cars have, you know, they're used there, and these cars that are there should be electric, but otherwise we also need to look outside of the cities.
Kaia, but you live in countryside. What about rural areas? How you can manage with your electric car?
Yes, I'm one of the lucky ones to produce my own energy, so I can load right from my own 19.8 kilowatts, which is completely sufficient. But I completely agree with you. Today I was driving from Western Estonia to here to Paide, and I was driving full EV, and I guess I should have been satisfied about the situation, but I wasn't. There was something wrong on the picture, and it was that I was driving alone. So I completely agree that it's not solution to have EV until nothing changes in the number of vehicles. So that should be our final aim, to decrease the number. So this EV is only halfway. But I think it's necessary, and this is why also Environmental Investment Center supports private persons with this grant. But maybe it's not yet the discussion point, or may I? I will just quickly then give you some figures. So as you might know, the call for private persons for EV support, which was 5,000 euros. It's one of the calls which is most popular in Estonia. So it was only 4 minutes that the application with what it took for application call to close. So the interest was huge, and this spring it was 1.6 million euros budget that was given to as a support for private persons for EVs. But yes, maybe later we'll have questions whether it will continue and so on, and we can change some thoughts about that. Too.
I think a very important question is also usually from public people ask that it's well-known fact that Estonia has a lot of black electricity. So we are polluting in some point. We are using electricity in other point. Yes, our city air comes cleaner, but in total, it doesn't really make a change if we still continue to produce black electricity and put it the electricity to our EVs. Who wants to take this question and then little bit explain this?
Yeah, I'll have you take that. What you're basically saying is there's no point in burning coal so that we can drive about in electric vehicles, because there's a pointless exercise that. So what I can use the example of what we've done in Dundee, which is building these hubs with using solar energy. So we put solar arrays on top of it, and that solar feeds second life car batteries. So the Renault batteries, they've got to an age of I think it's 7-8 year old. There's some depreciation. The battery is not obviously as good as it used to be. So we've now stored that, and that allows the energy from the sun to be stored. And then at 9 o'clock in the morning, when the electricity is the dearest, that's when this solar that you've generated kicks in. So it kind of peak shaves it and takes it away. So we've got many of these projects that you look at, and it's all about the renewable energy and connecting the whole thing together so that you're getting away from the grid. So basically what you don't want to do in the future is at 9 o'clock in the morning everybody needs their car charged and everybody needs a cup of tea and the whole grid collapses. So we need to make sure that we're balancing the energy, back to that energy sort of theme, with all our future projects that we're doing. We even take it to electric bikes. Electric bikes still need to be charged somehow. It's still using energy, smaller amounts, but it's still using it. So we really need to be, again, going back to, I'm going to be pretty boring because I'm going to use that word energy all the time. Where are we getting this energy from, and how can we utilize it properly across it? And I think that for Estonia, I think that the key to going forward is to make sure that you're generating that energy from somewhere yourself, and not having to rely on other countries round about you. Scotland is in that world, but I'm not going to politically go anywhere near Scotland in the UK, so I'll keep away from that. But it's a sort of similar scenario of a country that you need to be reliant on your own energy. And then you can take all these different things, whether it's electric vehicles, electric cars, etc., buildings forward.
Kai, do you see this energy transition also in stations? What will come? What changes are coming to stations?
Yeah, I can answer to that. I think it's, if we look to the charging EV, I think it's basically three-dimensional, you might say. It's public. Definitely the fuel stations, how they are today, will be part of this public charging. But it's not only, as this energy is not anymore tied to some big tank underground, it's basically available almost everywhere. So it's, of course, you can charge your car also in parking slots, in cinema, while you are in cinema, on a street. So there will be different agendas around how to build up this public charging network, because, as said, it's also a great question currently, I think we don't have enough, basically, like power in all these areas where we would like to have these high-speed or super high-speed chargers. So it's also requires to have a more like grid point of view. Some investments should be done. But we also have a private part, and it's a private charging. It's not exactly convenient to just have this plugged in as normal kind of any other appliance what you have at home. So I think the energy companies will work hard to kind of work out very convenient charging points for private customers, also for B2B customers, etc. So there will be lots of solutions, and going back to the stations or the gasoline stations like we call them today, my current company Circle K, which European head office is still in Norway. As Norway is like a leading country regarding EV as a total country, so also Circle K in Norway has already new stations where we don't have any more like fossil fuel tanks, so they just offer the electrical chargers. And it is a different because even with very high speed chargers, it takes approximately 10 to 15 minutes to get somewhere the amount of energy you need to go maybe 100, 150 kilometers. So yes, it's a bit different like it was. And in the beginning, definitely there was a lot of questions. Shall Circle K even invest into this business? Because if people can charge at home and in a parking spaces, why they even go to stations? But it's all about what is the energy you need and how long it takes. So it's obvious that at home you will charge in a low speed, basically the whole night to get your battery full. In these places like shopping malls, in a parking spaces, you maybe have these medium speed chargers, and on stations like we have today, the gasoline station on a road, basically there is only sense to have these extremely high speed chargers, but it's all about how much you are willing to pay. It's definitely will be cheaper in a long run at home because it takes time, but you have this time, and it's no rush. And that's why, and question, why do we even then spend money a bit more and charge with these ultra speed chargers? But I think it also raised here several times that people are kind of they look for a convenient life, and I think amongst us there is always somebody who has mobile phone basically needs to be charged immediately, otherwise there is no battery left. So, and surprisingly also people with EVs are forgetting to charge. You just arrive home and forget to plug in and etc. So it's convenience what we offer in the future in these stations. But of course, it will not be any more waste traffic what we see today at stations.
Any good takeaways from Milton Keynes? You have faced challenges with charging and with...
I mean, I have advocated for a small nuclear power plant in the middle of the city, but that was quickly, I was quickly told to shut up. But again, I don't think there's any one solution. So it's going to be some houses will have solar panels put on them, in the same way that some houses are going to have to go to sort of airflow pumps to have their heating done. It won't be it isn't any one solution, because we keep talking like it's somewhere in the future, and it isn't. It exists now. It's real, and it happens today. It's not like a future technology. What we have at the moment, and I think part of the challenges is around the vast majority of these technologies are new, and because there is a lot of overlap and a lot of Venn diagrams, what you tend to get is innovation in a certain sector, which means that if you're a fleet manager in Aberdeen and you've got £5 million to spend, are you going to buy hydrogen vehicles or are you going to buy electric vehicles? Or are you going to go for Betamax or HD DVD? You know, it's those choices that I wouldn't want to be. I'm a politician. I can stand on the stage and talk all day about how great how bad climate change is and how we want to do something about it, and then I give the responsibility to him and say, go and do something about it, please. And it's
I'm 24 years old. Look at the state of me.
And that's the challenge. I think that there's so much innovation. We were talking to some entrepreneurs just earlier, and the hydrogen vehicles, and it's sort of like, that's a great idea, but aren't Ford going to be doing this? Do I want your proprietary vehicle over somebody who makes 10 million vehicles a year and will produce the parts that make it cheaper to repair, etc., etc.? So these technologies exist, and they've existed a long time. We're talking 30 years into the lifetimes of some of these technologies. They're just iteratively getting better, and therefore the second-hand car market at the moment has exploded. So what does a second-hand green vehicle mean? Electric vehicle mean? If you're buying something that's 5 years out of date, you're buying also something that's got 100 miles, 150k less range on it for a lot more than a petrol vehicle. So I think that's the real choice. And I suppose coming back to what you were saying is, if you didn't have a car, you wouldn't be here. And I think too often as politicians, but also as commentators, we talk about cars like they are a commuting device to work, but they're not. They're so much more than that. I have a child seat in the back of my car because I don't just take him to school, he walks. But on a Friday, if I wasn't here, I'd be taking him to swimming. And on a Sunday, I'll take him to football whilst somebody else is doing something else in the family. And it's that convenience, I think, that you would physically wouldn't be here if you didn't have a car. But is it the right choice for this? And it's how we can make those sophisticated choices easier, because no one's going to accept something that's worse. If we're going to change, if we're going to really be sustainable, we shouldn't be offering people a lower standard of life, because people just won't accept it. As a politician, I can only reflect back to you what you're telling me. And often people tell me, be bold on climate change, and as soon as you're bold on climate change, I lose a ton of votes, and that's just reality. So sometimes politicians are reflective of the opinions, but also we've got to be realists in what we deliver. So I don't think we can offer any Estonians or anybody in the UK, because it's not. Imagine that it's like the world's going to burn, and if climate change is terrible, or we can all have a really crap standard of life. They are two choices that nobody wants to make. What we need is a better way of life that's more sustainable. And you've got to deliver it for me, Fraser.
I've got a 2-minute effort here to say, I'm just going to give a big shout out for EVs that we're talking about, because I'm an EV driver. They are cool as hell to drive. So it's on a basic level here. If I get in a diesel car with a gear stick, I'm just like, what is this? You know, I love driving my EV, and what I would have to say is, the analogy was used there about a mobile phone. This is the way that the cars are going. I do not capital buy any cars for my fleet anymore, because I know in 3 years' time, like your mobile phone, it's old hat. I was in 2018, I was in Geneva Motor Show, and I drove an electric vehicle that went for 900 miles. The technology is there, the cost, it's all about getting that cost down. But it's not that it's not coming. So, you roll on 6-7 years from now, and I've got a car that's going to go 900 miles. We'll go for 300, 400 miles. How much infrastructure do I really need for that? I will need to charge it up once a week. Do I really need to go there? The technology is moving that quick. What I would say you need to do is that in Estonia, is get an electric car. You know, it's why we did it to the taxis, so we could basically get bums on seats so people could experience electric vehicles. And I'm telling you, in about 3-4 years' time, the vehicles in this country, whether it's maybe second-hand cars coming from Germany, whether it's newer ones or whatever, the generation below me will be asking for an electric car, and in 3 years' time they're going to change it for the newest one, which has got the newest gadgets, which is just like your mobile phone, and it is coming. And it is really, really good to drive. There you go. And I've got no shares in the EV industry, by the way.
Yet.
May I have a question?
Yeah,
because it's very intriguing what you are talking about. I think what I have faced in Estonia, you said that Estonians do it. But we have here like scientists, we have like state representatives. I have as a private owned company. We have experience from politician, we have kind of local municipality. So who should lead in this? Like innovation implementation. I'm not talking anymore like innovation as such, but how to start kind of implementing it. From where to start? It's like chicken and egg, you know. It's what should be first? Shall we do this or that? So you have done it. So you two guys have living in an environment where it's basically already like a dead. How it started?
He looks young. Look at me. I'm the one that's done it.
Partly it's about leadership. Partly it's about demand. And I don't think anybody would be sitting here, and we wouldn't be sitting here unless we cared. And so the first adopters will be here. And then it's about saying, well, this is much better, isn't it? And then there'll be the second adopters, and then you end up just by nature of business, you will end up with a legacy chunk of people who will either never convert or will take a longer time to convert. But it's about leadership. It's about making sure the right level of government is making the right investment. So at some point governments will have to turn around, and I'm not of the same political party, but I give credit to the UK government for saying that that we are going to move away from the internal combustion engine from 2030, which is a major thing. So it is happening in the UK, but at the same time we've got to make sure that we're putting the electric charging points in the right place. But then there's got to be that demand. If it didn't matter, nobody would care. And so it's ultimately, are you willing to pay €20 more for an electric car? And what's that worth? Because again, you come back to the government, it should probably be €20 cheaper, shouldn't it? Because in reality, we're funding damage at the moment, and the reality is that damage is hidden from us. Like you say, if you put a die in the car, and so it is about being bold in leadership. But that might cost a little more, but that cost should be socialised, I think.
Yeah, I don't want to hog the conversation, but I mean, I agree with all your points. Ultimately, we start from the very top. Your government has to give you a long-term view of what way the country is going to go. So is it going to say, right, we're committing to EVs, so in 20 years this is our target, are we going to bring hydrogen into the scenario, etc. Government, come in there. Then it goes down to people like Peter. I've got equivalent in my local authority who back me as the guy who has to implement this. So if somebody tells you, what's your day-to-day job? I do strategy, I do planning, I actually put it in the ground, and then I get all the phone calls from people who complain about it not working. So I've seen it all, but one thing you need to do, and back to where I'm talking about innovation, is a flexible strategy. If I look back at 11 years ago, what I actually wrote down, what I thought was going to happen today, maybe, if I'm lucky, 5% of it is what is actually viable. The rest is absolute nonsense, because technology's wiped that out, what we've done. So you've got to have a flexible policy going forward. Estonia, certainly Asia Estonia, will be completely different from what's happening in Milton Keynes or what's happening in Dundee. But you've got to have at least an idea of what way you want to go. And then all these people in that, well, I've just discussed, have to back it and put it through. So businesses can understand it. They want certainty. They want to understand where we're going. And then the biggest one is to make sure that you take your public with you. You got to tell, like what we're talking about here is, why are we doing it? You know, if I don't know about Estonians, but I know if people tell Scotsmen or Scotswomen, they're going to do this. They tell them, rather than persuading them, we will do the complete opposite, because we hate getting told what to do. So if you want me to jump off this stage, tell me I can't jump off this stage and watch me go. You know, so you've got to understand how people think and get people to go with you. Bring them on with you, and I think that's the key to all this. Make sure that we're having these communications. I'd love to have seen EVs here so people could drive them. I'd love to have seen electric bikes so everybody's getting used to it. And hopefully next year that might happen. And I think that would be a really good positive way forward as well.
I mean, I wanted to say here as well that at least in a European Union level, the direction is clearly taken. I mean, the electric mobility is the future for, I mean, was it 2035? All new cars should be electric. So it means that, there's not really, in that sense, it's hard to imagine that there's any other future than electric cars. Of course, also car manufacturers have taken already this initiative to shift to electric mobility. So at least on governmental level, there's a clear agenda in that way. And I guess the next step is for people to also actually find usefulness in the electric mobility.
I would bring one more not joker, but ace to this conversation. I had a good talk with Elmo rental manager. Elmo is electric car rental company in Estonia. Now it's privately held. And head of Elmo said to me in private conversation that he sees great potential growth not in EVs, but hydrogen vehicles. So hydrogen is in EU focus also instead of electrical vehicles. But also the problem is that we have like gray hydrogen right now available, and then this is also the chicken and egg. We don't have stations, we don't have demand response.
And it consumes actually a lot of energy to produce hydrogen, which is another aspect. So.
I thought this was a joke. We're going to upset people that are in hydrogen out there.
No.
I think the solution to that is going back to the mobility on demand question, is that if you move towards a service, it doesn't really matter if you're not investing in large amounts in capital. If you're paying your €150 a month and you go, right, I want to get from here to here, please service, you tell me which is the best way to get from here to here. It doesn't matter because you're not taking the risk on the investment and that capital. And I think we're probably 25, 30 years away from having sort of the infrastructure. The infrastructure of hydrogen would work best on the infrastructure of today. You'd effectively just replace petrol with hydrogen and you'd replace the engine in the car with. But we're talking. I think we're talking about more of a sustainability leap than an infrastructure change. But to me, it doesn't really matter what is powering that vehicle, so long as it's clean energy in some ways. And if you're not taking the risk on buying the capital, if I've not spent €10,000 and taken out a loan, or I've got a monthly demand, it doesn't really matter because somebody else is taking that risk for me, and that's why fleet managers have sort of, you now lease more than you buy.
Yeah, I think that I'd be a very brave man to say exactly what's going to happen with hydrogen or anyone on this panel, or we can only kind of half predict the future because again the technology is moving that quick. An example of that would be, you mentioned the gaming industry in Dundee. We've amazingly, in Dundee, destroyed the minds of young men and women with Grand Theft Auto and Minecraft, which was originated out of Dundee. But what has actually happened is this: we've, as you can hear, we've moved to e-mobility. We've got all our taxis, we've got all these cars. We go into a pub now in Brewdog in Dundee, and what we've created, the guy who created this Minecraft has created a game. The youngsters in Dundee will come in to drink their beer, and then they will play driving round Dundee on the wall of the pub in an electric car. You know, they're driving around here and they're getting used to it, and that just shows you the change over the last 5 years of the mindset of people thinking that you're walking in a pub and you're driving, probably too fast, by the way, round the city in a Nissan Leaf, etc. And it just shows you how all the different sectors are actually coming together in this innovation. You know, the gaming industry is coming together with the transportation industry, and it's kind of all colliding together, whereas about 15, 20 years ago, if somebody told me that was what were happening, I would say, you're off your absolute mind. What are you talking about, playing an electric car game in a pub? But that's the sort of thing that is going on just now, and once you start this, it just doesn't stop. And I think that you know, I think the way I'm feeling is Estonia is on the cusp of this, and especially with the sort of startups and the tech industries that you have in Estonia, you're in a great position to capitalise on all the things we've been talking about.
Do we have any questions from audience? Someone wants to ask? Yes, please.
Hi. Is it okay? Yeah.
Yep.
I've got more comment about something Peter said earlier. That was about kind of picking our spots in terms of where and for what and when we use cars in urban areas. So there's that example about you not driving your child to school, but driving them to swimming. So here it's kind of a minor point, but I think we need to be careful not to fall into this kind of lack of imagination trap, where we assume that because we use car for this kind of journey today, we need to use car for this type of journey, in the future. Because especially the swimming example, that can very easily be solved using various kinds of mobility or urban planning methods. So I think in urban contexts, at least, there's really quite few types of journeys that we can't address in some kind of urban planning or transport planning way. So I just think we need to be careful about that. And then another thing was the kind of political conundrum where your voters want you to do something, but then when you do, they don't like it. So I've got good news for you, because I'm sure you know about the example of Ghent, where they took some really radical action, really, and actually the vice mayor, who was the main guy behind it, I think he got re-elected with a better more votes than the last time. So it is possible. It's not it's not impossible, definitely. Okay, thanks.
Nothing is impossible. I mean, we wouldn't all be here unless somebody has great ideas, I think. And like you said, everywhere is different. Personally, I wouldn't want to have to come out of a leisure centre that was built in the mid-1970s in Newport Pagnell, which is in the north of Milton Keynes, on a December evening when it's -2 and it's raining, with a child that's just got out of a swimming pool and want to take him home on an electric scooter. It just won't work. But if I'm able to go on my app and sort of say I need a small pod for 2 people, then that's possibly a better thing. But we need to get to the world where that happens. And again, there's a lot of aggregated demand in that, and it's how you. I don't personally, having attended a lot of these conferences and a lot of smart cities conferences over there, I don't need to be inspiring anymore. I've done my 8 years, or I'm into my 8th year now, so I can be a little bit more free. I won't own a Mercedes. I will probably own a license to the Mercedes brand, and they will send me their level of cars, etc., etc. But they're only going to do that when it's worth more to them as a business than the current business model. And we live in a world where I have my own views, and I would really, really love to do lots of things, but some things you are bound into reality. And some of those will be demand-led, some will be led by legislation, some will cross over, and that's just life. Life is more progression than revolution, but sometimes you're right, revolutions do come along, and it's about picking the right one.
I agree with you. I think you should be more bold, and I think you should take risks, because I would certainly watch election night, if that's the case, to see how he gets on.
But I'm still thinking, isn't the problem also the way Milton Keynes is planned? I mean, it's a place that is really planned for cars. So I think that's part of your problem. And I don't know where your swimming pool is, but I assume that it's not conveniently located close to public transport. It's not nearby you, and etc. etc. So of course it's a huge challenge how to remake the city. Actually, yeah.
But in Estonian urban planning, you as scientists, you are focusing also in Tallinn and Harjumaa more because there are like more cars and more problems, or you are planning also like rural areas, or
I am not planning.
Okay.
I'm working at university, so I'm doing research and I'm teaching. But how to say? I mean, of course, looking from Tallinn perspective, then the transport is easier to organize in the city, yeah, because I mean the city is dense and public transport is actually very convenient in any European standard, to be honest, yeah. But if you imagine how you actually came to buy there, what options did you have? Did you have what other options than car actually you had? Then you realize how complicated it is.
I heard that COVID has infected the city transport a lot, so that still people start to use their own transport more.
You've done this as a country, though, haven't you? This town, a population of about 10,000. When there's not everybody here, and I take out my phone and I've got a 4G signal. If I was in a town of 8,000 somewhere in the UK, I would probably be lucky to even have any sort of data signal whatsoever. So you've done it as a nation, and you've got a reputation as a nation over the past 30 years, but certainly over the past 15 years of being a very outward-facing, a very innovative country, and I think you've done it in one sphere. I can't see why you wouldn't do it in another sphere, because it's the way that you have to go, and you're a very young nation in many ways, and I think just by holding the events like this, but there's a clear drive though to want to do it, and I think that's really important. That makes it easy for politicians to be bold, because I'm bold in the UK because I've set a climate change. I want to be carbon neutral by 2030 and carbon negative by 2050, which when we declared our climate emergency years ago, people told me I was mad, and now it's mainstream. And so you have done it in one area, so why couldn't you do it in others?
Just so we don't get too carried away, I'd love to know how many people actually in the audience have an electric car. Is there anyone? Do you count? So you got a hybrid. So I mean, I kind of feel that we've moved on to planning, we've moved on to energy, which is all happening, and I'm talking about all these things in Dundee, and we're talking about Milton Keynes. To me, Estonians have to even start to believe that electric, yes, you've said that they've decided that's going that way, but no one in this audience has changed an electric vehicle yet. Well, there's a lot of communication and a lot of understanding that has to happen between the people that are talking up here and you guys to convince you that this is the way forward. I can see it in your eyes. So I'd be hoping that we'd be looking to communicate more with the public, so that in a year's time 7 hands go up, and then etc. etc.
You wanted that, Kaia?
Yes, I've been listening to this discussion, and today we are talking about electromobility in general, but I think next discussions maybe we should talk separately electromobility developments in urban areas and rural areas, because it seems for me from the discussion that there are different actually needs and starting points. The problems we have in urban areas, that we don't have those problems in rural areas, and vice versa. One interesting thing I wanted to mention here is that the Environmental Investment Center started a project with the city of Tallinn. There will be electric buses running in Tallinn, hopefully soon. And maybe in at least in urban areas we can provide this excellent experience of electric buses for persons, and this might also give them the feeling of what you need. Just explain that people need this good feeling experience before they make choices themselves. But in rural areas, of course, people today, like my family, we don't think like that, oh, it would be nice to have electrical buses. We think that it would be nice to have buses. So I think in that sense, today we have been talking about urban and rural mixed, but it looks to me that in future maybe it needs separate discussions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree, but it's also there are in rural and urban there are differences, because I think in one hand, if we talk about EVs or when it's easy to charge, because in rural areas you most probably have your own house and it's easy, but on the other hand in urban areas, yes, we don't maybe need those cars, but also it's kind of challenging to kind of convince people not to have this car, because it's in their brains what it gives this freedom, what we already started this discussion. But I think what is most challenging is really to think about what happens to apartment buildings, how to really manage this amount of cars, and how to make this like a community-based system, how to use maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cars per kind of house or building. So it's yes, I agree. It's not about only changing the kind of cars what we have today on EVs, but more about what is the next way of moving around, how we do it and how we do it energy efficiently, but also conveniently, because I don't believe in things where people are pushed towards the new solutions. There has to be some convenience. People tend to believe that they have to get paid or get something to move, but it's not so clear. It's more like how I can get some kind of convenience out of this new lifestyle, and I think this is the question what we should ask about.
Norway is a really interesting. I mean, I'll be honest. Yeah, I'd like to think that all the things that we're doing in Dundee came out of my head, but not really. I just ran about all the world's stealing it all. And Norway is a classic. I heard that we talked about there. Norway, to try and engage the public, and I'm going to show my age here, they got equivalent of a I don't know what the young band that they have. It wasn't a but because they're about my age. But it was a young band, and they got them four young lads to get into electric cars, and they blogged about it every week to tell the generation, look, this is amazing. I love this car. They also got the richest man in Norway. I think he was in the forestry, and they got him out of his Bentley and they put him into a Nissan Leaf. And again, it was to show the public and to communicate to the public, you know, these people are driving electric vehicles. This is great. I admittedly, I went back to Dundee and tried to find out what's the equivalent of a in Dundee, and it wasn't the best band, I can assure you. And we tried to find some movie star, but there wasn't many of them either. But we got this equivalent in Dundee to drive about and talk about it. And those are the sort of things that make it normalise it. If these guys who have got loads of money are driving electric vehicles, I need to start looking at it. So there's all those things that you can do to then sort of get people to for themselves, rather than listening to me telling you electric vehicles are a great thing. You guys need to go out and find out for yourself, and it makes it an easier job.
Just a quick reflection. I think what was a very important point here was that you mentioned this famous guy, that he was driving Nissan Leaf and not Tesla, the newest. So I think here's the difference, because if we make them drive those cars, then again, we don't mainstream it.
There's a real danger that we overcomplicate this. I'm a politician, but I'm also a human, and I make my decisions in exactly the same way I make everybody's decisions. Price point, and sort of is that for me? You know, that's it really. Can I afford it or not? And does it do what I need to do? That's it.
No, there is also a show-off point, because I think as soon that EVs are also producing SUVs as EV cars, when Estonians are happy, because normal Estonian has to have the big cars. So it's
we have big families.
And that's fine, but I think the complication now comes, and you better telling me this than I am, is I think people are, the electorate, what I would call the electorate, people are cleverer than that, because they realise, well, hang on, this car might be within my price point, or you tell me sort of, because you import all your cars, an electric car is 35,000 euros, you know, that would be out of my price range. It's ridiculous, particularly if you're a young person just starting out in life, just graduated from university, living in the city, you know, your job is not brilliantly secure, your housing costs a fortune. But people understand, well, if all I'm doing is exchanging a gas one of those to an electric one of those, I'm still going to sit in the traffic jam. And you're coming back to your urban planning point. My wife is an urban planner, and so we have some interesting discussions. Well, interesting, but the reality is that life is quite complicated. But most of people's choices boil down to sort of, can I afford that, and is it right for my current lifestyle? And actually, the problem is that second bit is that we've all become a bit lazy. We're all slightly too bigger here. We don't really live in particularly well-planned cities, because people go, I don't want that housing there, I want it over here, because my view is nice here and it's not nice over here. And this bit of the population is generally a little bit less affluent and probably not engaged quite so much in politics, so it's easier to put housing there than it is to put there. And so I think it's partly a reflection of politicians lacking a bit of guts to do what is right rather than do what is expedient. But it's also sometimes the electorate gets what the electorate deserves. And so transition, we shouldn't overcomplicate these things. There are some very easy things that we can do, but there are also some very difficult choices that have to be made.
Yeah, I think going back onto your point about the Nissan Leaf, so we built charging hubs across Dundee, and the first charging hub was specifically built in the poorest area of the city to deflect completely away from the fact that it's only Tesla drivers and people with money. So we built the hub there. It was for the taxi industry and for local people who had a driver license but could never afford a vehicle. So we put in car shares, so vehicles there that they could car clubs so that they could use all electric. But what has happened now is that because we've had this infrastructure in for many years now, we have 2 universities in the city. So 1 in 7 people in Dundee are students, so a high young population. And what you're now seeing is second-hand Renault Zoes, the little Zoes. You're now seeing mothers and fathers, your kids are going to university. They're naturally buying flats in the poorer area because that's where the cheaper rent is. And the mum and dad are buying these second-hand Zoes because they know that the council has infrastructure in this area. So we're seeing a huge intake of the uptake of these small electric second-hand vehicles that can maybe only do 100 and 120 miles, but that's all these students are looking for. They go shopping, they'll go and do X, Y, and Z. So it is starting to develop, and as the point is, it has to be the whole society that's benefiting from this and not your Tesla drivers.
Of course, I guess one of the problems there is also the gentrification that actually takes place. I mean, that you bring in this kind of charging infrastructure to poorer neighborhoods, but you also make them attractive then for people with potentially more financial means. I think that's one of the challenges. I'm sorry to be this kind of person who always...
You need to see this area. So what you do is what we've done, which is put infrastructure across the city now. So we've gone into the affluent areas who do have the Tesla, but we specifically made that the last charging hub that we built. So it was a active, and we told the public what we were doing. We told them that this is the reason why we're doing it, etc. And to try and bring everybody with you. So there is now infrastructure into those areas, but as I said to you, we need to make sure. The example also that's happened there is that people will go for a job. So they need a job and they need 20 miles to go for that job. So we offer that electric car to somebody. We know that normally we would give them buses because we know they can't afford it. They get they get that electric car because they show us their license and they drive for that job interview and come back again. I can go for that same job interview. I have to pay for it because they know that I've got money. So I pay for it. So it's like free school meals, but using e-mobility. So again, what I'm talking about, you're touching different touch points. You're talking about issues around people with, that struggle on a day-to-day basis. How can electric vehicles benefit them? So you've got to start thinking not just on your electric car, but the society and what can it do for it.
I think this point of social justice is very, very important, that the electric mobility is not available only for those with financial means, but also those with actually, lower income and less opportunities. So, I think you raised a very important question.
It's also quite important because in the most deprived areas of my city, car ownership is around 32%. In the most affluent areas, it's above 100%. And that's the difference, is that it's access to public transport and things like that. And it's all very well talk about car ownership, but actually, if you talk about social justice, they're not car owners to begin with, and that's really challenging.
So even going into coaches, so we put in enough infrastructure. We want 150 chargers, and a private company has come in, out with the big bus companies. It has brought 2 electric coaches. It goes from Dundee to Edinburgh and Dundee to Glasgow. That coach is 100% electric. It's the first intercity electric coach in the UK. It is £7.50 to get to Edinburgh. If you get on the train, it costs you £30 for that. So there is ways and means of making this work, and also, now you're travelling long distances with multiple passengers involved in it. So there's some really good stories there but you have to start thinking not just, look, we're going to chuck some electric cars in there and the wealthy will buy it.
So what happens, I don't own a car, or I own a car, sharing a car share, and I live rurally. What happens when I go somewhere or want to go somewhere where those aggregating systems don't work, that they don't exist? And so you're back to the point of the reason you own a car and I own a car is I would love to go everywhere by train, but not everywhere has a train station, or not everywhere has a train station that's linked up to the line that in the 1800s was built. So a lot of this stuff we are waiting for there to be enough demand but that's great when I want to travel from Dundee to Edinburgh. What happens when I want to drive from here, which is a city of 10,000, to another city of like 3,000, or etc., where I get a lot of things that come to me that are stamped NEV, and the EV doesn't stand for electric vehicle, it stands for not economically viable. And it's that EV that often is the turning point of investment or not, whether you're private or public. It's, well, there's just not the demand there. And that's where I come back to your country that has a 4G signal, where I imagine it wasn't particularly economically viable to install a phone mast here, but you did it. So how did Estonia go around doing that? Because there must have been some economic model that allowed that to be done.
Yeah. So that's going back to the point you were making earlier, which is about the difference between urban and rural. So Dundee classically is the urban city, but surrounded by countryside and farms, etc. So the model we are having to develop at the moment is, I can see all this infrastructure and we have the numbers of cars. We will generate revenue as a council from all these vehicles. But at no point is there a business case for rural towns and villages that people are commuting into my city, but how are you going to put infrastructure into there? So the model that we're working on is you've got to share that. You've got to, the urban areas have got to start looking at paying for that infrastructure that's never really going to make a business case out there to make it as a whole, as one. We talk about 4G. Scotland is a classic example of what happened with 4G, which we let the private industry in, and every big city in the country, Aberdeen, Dundee, Glasgow, Edinburgh, we've all got 4G. But even 5-6 years on, the Scottish Government is still paying for all the 4G of the areas, the rural areas, that wouldn't have a business case, and private industry weren't interested. We're still putting that in. When you turn on the TV in London and other places are putting 5G in, and we're still trying to do this 4G thing. So I think that another point I'm trying to make here is I think there has to be a private-public partnership to as a whole for the whole country, because of that aspect about rural and urban. And I think that maybe Estonia is in that sort of sphere.
Yeah, I can also, I fully agree with it, because if we talk about this 4G, it's basically, yes, we have a very small country, physically small, so it's easy to cover with basically with mobile networks and etc. But I think currently with this EV is exactly what you mentioned before. The government has to decide as a bit like a long term what will be the next energy what we will use, because the private will come only because they are sure what will be the next means, because we are in a kind of deciding point. It has been like gasoline and diesel forever. Like it's just a question how many stations you want to build. So Estonia is so covered with gasoline stations that you basically can walk from another. So it's a question now: is it a hydrogen? Is it like electricity? Is it bioethanol? Is it kind of biomethane? Whatever. So it's question about is it combination of those, but at some point somebody has to say that yes, we believe that the private consumption or the private use will be electricity, and then it comes hand in hand. But also the city planning has to do some kind of final miles to make sure that this charging will be available for those who doesn't live in a private housing. So
let's turn to audience. Does anyone has a question and comment? Raise your hand and then we bring you a mic. Yes. Please.
Yeah, hi, me again. Just a quick one to Kaja. Do you see, is there any chance that in the near future the GIGS program to support purchasing of EVs could get expanded to also include electrically supported cargo bikes, for example? Is that in the realms of possibility?
Yes, you seemed so close, so I forgot the microphone. Yes, it was the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Communications who ordered this study, very recent study. I don't know if you're familiar with this. And the main conclusion of the study was about whether the system of grants so far we have implemented, whether it should continue in that way or there should be some changes. And the conclusion was that the state should continue giving grants to support EV mainstreaming. But about the cargo bikes, that's a good question. I have a colleagues here, and I'm looking at their faces. Did this study also cover suggestions about supporting cargo bikes? I didn't. No. So my answer to you is that so I can't lean to any study saying that yes, in future we will support cargo bikes. But I know that this is hot topic, and also my colleagues at the Environmental Investment Center working designing these subsidies. So they know it's a hot topic. So I can say that for coming year we state don't have a subsidy or grant for cargo bikes, but it's hot topic. So keep on asking.
And just to support you, we gave a number of our local businesses cargo bikes, and they really do work. We didn't subsidise them; we actually fully funded them, and they really do work.
Good. Yes, please.
Can I subject exactly the same question? Your most recent round of grants, I think there was 320 that you gave out, and you said it was full in 4 minutes. So it suggests there's loads and loads of demand. Is it capped in terms of the vehicle that someone can actually buy with that money? Or are you risking helping somebody to buy a Tesla? So I think in the UK, the equivalent schemes, you can only use it for a vehicle up to a certain price point. And also, if it's so popular, is the only thing stopping you doing more of it sort of the funding? Because I think in the UK, when we've run these schemes, there hasn't been a limit on how many people can apply. If it's as serious a problem that we're dealing with as we all think it is in terms of climate change, when might we expect to see a scheme where it's just open the whole time?
Yes, very good point. This was also one of the points that the study covered, that it should be open, this call, all year round, not just by one date, because this also has impact on the market and on the businesses who sell these cars. So in Estonian it said turu moondus, how is it in English? Market. Sorry. Okay. But
I think it's market disruption.
Yes,
market disruption.
but yes, I actually I have to correct myself. The grant from Environmental Investment Center, it was for private persons and companies, so it was actually for both. But yes, there are limits how many vehicles per company can be purchased, and there is also requirement that there has to be a certificate that green energy is used for this particular vehicle purchased with a grant, and also, of course, the limits how expensive the vehicle can be, and so on. So yes, quite regulated in that sense.
What was quite interesting was right at the beginning you discussed about how Estonia keep their cars for so long. When you start looking at EVs, to really make them work, you've got to look at whole life costs. If you look at how long you're going to keep it up against how long you keep your diesel vehicle, then you start making. Certainly, when I would discuss vans, when I look at a van, the new vans that come out, Nissan NV200s, against a diesel van equivalent. Just now, you're starting to break even against that in the 2.5 years.
Mm.
And if that's and we're talking about maintenance costs being 30% less, you're talking about general running costs, etc. Once you get to that, then you can start looking at making. Yes, there's that extra cost in an electric van to begin with, but by the time you get to year 4, year 5, you've made a huge saving against the diesel equivalent. And I think, given what I heard, that you're keeping vehicles longer, I think that's something that should be pushed.
Also, battery lifetime is 200,000 kilometers, up to 300,000 kilometers. That's a very long, 10 years.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, let's wrap this conversation up, and let's do it so that everybody has his or her personal takeaway from this conversation. Whoever wants to start.
I'll start, seeing I've talked so much, so I'll let everybody else go. I just genuinely have been inspired by speaking to the Estonians today about that they know what to do. They're talking about it. They want to be convinced this is the way to go. But I'm pretty sure once the Estonians go for this, and I think Peter's been mentioning the 4G all the time here, and I when I think about some places in Scotland and I'm sitting going like this, you guys have got this done, and I think once this going, I really am encouraged by what's going to happen. I think I'll come back here in a couple of years' time, and you'll be telling me all about it rather than me.
I can comment. I think I definitely have touched this subject before, but not maybe so deeply. And for me, it was very interesting to really see that, yes, there is not about replacing one car with another, but more thinking about this larger picture, how we create energy, how we consume energy, how we have this as a whole energy system. So thank for this. It opened my eyes in many ways, and I got also something out of this discussion, not just coming here to talk to.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think I remember the 2G and the 4G point quite well from here. I think it was mentioned many times, but I think the point really to for me, I mean, there are a lot of points, but I think which was also stressed here, the city and rural aspect, and what's the use of the electric vehicles in the different environments. I mean, it's something I've been thinking before, but I think it's super crucial. And if you think about, I mean, the Human Development Report article I wrote a few years ago. We divided it between different geographical areas, right? We talk about city centers, we talk about urban areas, and we talk about rural areas. And I think in Estonia, it's really important to actually pay attention to exactly not just cities, but rural areas as well. And I think, I mean, how to adapt electric vehicles to also these kind of circumstances. I think that's something I think we should definitely look into further.
Kaia, please.
Yes, it was this summer that there was a piloting program launched in Estonia, in island of Saaremaa, in Sõrve Peninsula, about demand transportations. They are now piloting there, and it was a big news. And today's discussion confirmed me that maybe next piloting should be combined electric mobility and demand-based transportation. So we have done already one step. We are piloting this in Saaremaa. So maybe next thing would be combined EV and demand-based transportation.
Yes, Peter.
I think the thing that struck me most is when Fraser asked the question, how many of you own an electric vehicle? And only the British ambassador put his hand up. But the reality of why we're all here is really quite serious. The fact that there are temperatures of 48 degrees in Sicily, the fact that it now, what was once a 200-year event rain event in Milton Keynes and flooding houses is now happening every 6 months. The fact that we have forest fires in Greece, the fact that bits of California are now the driest they've ever been. Climate change is not in the future. It's not something that is about my 6-year-old boy, because it's always about, will someone please think of the children? It's now. It's happening today. And actually, action needs to take place soon, but it needs to take place now. And therefore, we, as a panel, we can sit here and have ideas, but it's worth nothing unless there's an outcome from it. And the outcome, I think Fraser has put it better than I ever could, and I think all the panel did, is go and buy an electric vehicle if you can, because it will make a difference. Everything makes a difference. If I always tell this story about why do I tell my little boy to switch the light off? Because one light, he always tells me one light doesn't make a difference. One light doesn't make a difference, but if his light's on and my neighbour's light's on, that's 2. If they're both switched off, that's 2. If the street is switched off, that's 50. If the town is switched off, that's 50,000. If the country is switched off, that's 500,000. And if the European Union switches off one light in every room, that's millions. And so we all have a responsibility to go out there and do, because climate change is here and it's happening and it is now, and the effects are being felt by populations today. So go out and buy an electric vehicle if you can, because it will make a difference.
I will do. That was my final conclusion. I'm actually planning to buy a new car, and you convinced me.
So if you don't have an electric car, I'm inviting you to Dundee, and you come over to Scotland. I'll get you an electric vehicle, and you can come and see the best football team in the world in Dundee United.
Thank you. Thank you, British Ambassador. Thank you, British Embassy, to put this panel together. And I know that they want to thank also our panelists as well. So please give a big applause. Okay, thank you. That was it. You can privately have conversations and thank you from our side.